All right, so Article 5, appraisal contingency. So this is also automatically invoked if you checked financing above, or you can also invoke this by checking the box that's subject to an appraisal, but it's still a cash closing, or what we would call a cash closing. And it says it's contingent to close upon an appraisal from a certified real estate appraiser establishing the value of the property. This does not say who has to get that appraisal. This does not say that it has to be the lender's appraisal. This does not say it has to be the buyer's appraisal. This does not say it has to be the buyer's first appraisal, okay? And there's a reason why I walk through that nuance. It says under subsection A, in the event the appraisal establishes the value is less than the purchase price, the buyer may, within 48 hours of the receipt of that appraisal amount, do one of three things, okay? So the buyer can waive it. He has 48 hours to waive. So 48 hours is of the essence after receiving it. So he can waive it. Number two, he can terminate the contract. So he can walk away from it. Or number three, he can give written notice of the appraised value to the seller. And if he follows under three, if he says, I'm going to give notice to the seller of that, he can actually then invoke a period of 48 hours to negotiate an amended purchase price and or payment terms. But if they can't reach an agreement, either party can terminate after that 48-hour period. So what that means is practically this is a nuance. If a buyer gets an appraisal for the purchase price and they want to wiggle their way out and find a loophole, and they go get a second appraisal for $1 less than the purchase price, they can use that second appraisal to try to get out of the contract. Now, is that in good faith? I don't know. Is that what is fair? I don't know. I can tell you that we decided that instead of trying to have a section that dealt with all of the different ways appraisals happen, and the fact of whether it's in a lender's appraisal and when the buyer gets a copy of the appraisal, this is the better way to handle it, or is for what we see and experience. Again, you can contract around this, but it's allowing the buyer to get out under that period. Then it talks about if the appraisal has not been completed at least 5 days before closing, buyer may, in its sole discretion, elect to extend the closing for 7 days. So you now see we're starting to invoke things that look down the road to closings. We talked about the input section. We talked about the earnest money escrow, right? We talked about our disclosures. We talked about our investigations and the financing. And now we're talking about appraisal. And that stuff's all looking down towards the closing. Hopefully you'll see how this is fitting together in a chronology. And it's not really a flow chart, but piece by piece. And so what this says is that the buyer gets to extend closing for 7 days, no questions asked, and it's sole discretion if the appraisal is back. Because the appraisal is typically one of the things that take longer to get done. Does that make sense? So he can extend the closing for that reason. And 5C says that if buyer doesn't timely notify, so written notice of the extension, this is going to the top of the next page, written notice of the extension is required to invoke that section. And if you don't, you've waived that right. And he's obligated to close unless there's some other section that may extend closing or provides. And that brings us then to the final contingency section, which is section 6. This is similar to what you all have now. It's a little bit different in the way you add in addenda or handwritten notes, but it's the same concept, which is you can always add additional contingencies here, like survey that you could check above, and you would say attach survey contingency. You could have some other contingency you want, like contingent upon the sale of this or the purchase of a new home by the seller. Obviously, the sale of a buyer's residence is already one of the pre-populated contingencies to check. You could have other ones to have as well. You could have right of first refusals. I mean, there's any number of these. What we've done is tried to say, we're not going to address every single one of those other contingencies. We're going to address the ones that we think happen the majority of time. And these would cover 99% of transactions, or as close to that as possible. But there still may be other contingencies that still need to be addressed in some way. And we're acknowledging that.